Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. I want to welcome new listeners because I suspect we have a few. I have been out and about speaking and training and working with teams over the last couple weeks, and I know that there's a few new people listening to the show. So welcome to new listeners especially. And for those of you who are tuning in after a keynote that I gave in the last week, I'm so glad that you're here. So today's episode is actually inspired by a keynote that I am giving this week, I'm giving, so this episode goes live on Tuesday, March 10th. I'm giving a keynote on Wednesday, March 11th. And this episode is inspired by the keynote that's being given on the 11th. And I suspect that many people at that keynote will come and listen to this episode after. So if you are someone who is in that audience, I'm so glad that you're here. And the reason I wanted to do this episode is because this thing always happens when I'm creating content, where I get really excited and involved and invested and end up with way too many things I want to say. So as I was coming up with my content for this keynote around women in ambition, I was like, yeah, this is not all going to fit in the keynote. So this is like the stuff that I couldn't fit in the keynote, but I knew everyone would still want to know. So we're going to be talking about women and ambition. And we're going to be talking about what ambition looks like between women, from one woman to the next, and also how you can use really specific questions to guide your ambition or your success. So one of the things I talk about in this keynote is how ambition can look so different for women than it does for men, but also how it can look so different between women, which I think is really amazing. And one of the things that I've been able to witness over my last 23 years of coaching women in various capacities is really how different ambition looks for women depending on where they're at in their life, what season they're in, depending on what their strengths are, what their current goals are, and then depending on, honestly, how much they want to challenge the status quo, how much they want to buck the system. And increasingly, I think women are wanting to do this, which I find really exciting, really interesting. And I feel like it's this recognition that so many of us thought that success needed to look like one thing, or thought that we needed to fit in a certain kind of a box in order to have the kind of success we thought we wanted. And when we tried to go down that path or down that road, we got to a certain point and realized, oh, wait, the costs to be on this road and stay on this road are costs I'm unwilling to incur. And so we started to reroute our ambition. And we started to look at, okay, how can I do this in a way that makes sense to me? How can I make my ambition about me rather than making my ambition self-sacrificial or centering someone else? How do I make sure that I'm the one benefiting from my ambition, or the people closest to me or my family are the people benefiting from my ambition? And that it's not just systems and people who are benefiting from my ambition who don't need the benefits that I most need, that I'm not only using my ambition in service of others and in service of systems that maybe weren't set up for me to be super successful, but that I'm using my ambition in service to myself or to the people who need my gifts and talents and strengths the most, which sometimes are not the people who are, sometimes they're not our bosses. Sometimes they're not the organizations we work for. And sometimes we have this realization like, oh, I'm in the wrong place, or I'm climbing the wrong ladder, or I'm going down the wrong path. And if I keep doing this, the people who are benefiting from the work that I'm doing are not the people that I am here to serve. They're not the people that feel called to serve. They're not the systems that I want to uphold. I want to be having an impact or influence in this other way. And in order to do that, I need to leave this system, or I need to leave this place, or I need to route my success or my path in a different way. So I've recognized for me, my ambition, my success is not determined by a lot of cultural norms. And it's funny because I grew up very much a rule follower and following like the exact trajectory that everyone would have expected from me. Like you go to high school and you get straight A's, and then you go to college and you get straight A's, and then you get a good job. And like I did all those things and pretty quickly realized that going down the path of finding like one profession and sticking with it for 40 years and then retiring was just not going to be my jam. And I know that that's not a lot of people's jam at this point in the world. And yet that's what a lot of us were raised with, right? We had parents who did like, you got trained to do one thing and you did that one thing for 40 years and then you retire. And so recognizing that that was definitely not going to be for me, and recognizing that I tend to have like 7-year cycles. And so while much of my work, it just kind of keeps building on each other, I definitely kind of shift gears or evolve to the next phase. Sometimes it's not really shifting gears as much as it's evolving, layering on new layers every 7 years or so. And for me, a lot of that is around looking at what I want my success to look like and what fills me up, what allows me to work in my strengths and my gifts, and really getting clear on what ambition looks like for me, and really openly understanding, acknowledging, and being very okay with the fact that my ambition looks so different than almost everyone else I know. So I definitely have built relationships with colleagues and professional peers over time who are doing very similar work to me and doing the same thing as me. But in terms of like, family members and friends that I grew up with and friends I went to college with and those kinds of things, like, and even friends from my master's program, the work I'm doing is so different than theirs, and the path I've chosen is so different than theirs. And so I've been very much okay, and if not excited by the fact that I'm doing things differently. And that's what for me, ambition looks like doing things differently, looks like doing things my way. And to the point that I struggle to do things the same way as other people, or to do things that are, put upon me. And so I would much rather chart my own course. So for me, ambition looks like creating success for myself in different ways. For me, ambition looks like reinventing myself or reinventing the things that I'm known for over time. For me, it looks like challenging the status quo and using those challenges of the status quo to position my career and to position my career growth. For me, my ambition looks like working to support women more than supporting the systems that undermine women. And that's definitely been a common theme across industries. When I worked with moms, when I worked in the fitness industry, really noticing like, where are women getting the short end of the stick here? Where are women underserved? Where are women being actively harmed in social frameworks and societal frameworks? And how can my work counter that to support the women who are being actively harmed in social constructs, and support those women rather than supporting the systems that undermine women and that undermine our ambition, whatever that might look like. For me, my ambition also looks like expanding my influence in new realms pretty consistently, which is challenging and scary and also very exhilarating. And so just even in the last year, as I was thinking about this in preparation for this episode, noticing that I've been able to expand my work into more work with sales teams and into more public sector work and into getting into some work in educational spaces. And so kind of constantly looking at, the thing that I'm doing over here also could be really beneficial over here. And how can I move into these different realms and use similar work that really lights me up and gets me excited, but use it in different areas? And that feels really exciting to me. And that feels like that new stimulus it's very rewarding to me. So what I want to think about, what I want you to be thinking about is, where have you maybe made some assumptions about ambition or assumptions about success and what you think it quote unquote should look like or what you think it does look like? Where are those assumptions maybe getting in your way, and how are they holding you back? And so when I look at ambition in women, and I look at the women I've worked with over the past 23 years and different kinds of coaching that I've done with women, I've been able to note a few different things. And this is across realms, across sectors, across age, across industries, across experience, that ambitious women are very comfortable. Comfortable is not the right word. They're very open, because sometimes they're very uncomfortable, but they're very open to charting their own path. They're very open to doing things differently. And that doesn't mean that there's not some things that they do that are, similar to what other people do, but they're open to doing things a different way. They're also really clear on what they say yes and no to. And so ambitious women are okay with saying no to things. They're okay with turning down opportunities. They understand that yeses and nos come with costs, and they're good at weighing the cost benefit analysis of yeses and nos to determine what are the right yeses for me right now? What are the right nos for me right now? And am I okay with giving someone a no and having them be dissatisfied or upset with me or frustrated with me or disappointed in me? And ambitious women are okay with letting other people down in that way. They're okay with saying no to something, letting someone else down, and recognizing that that no is in service of their growth or in service of their needs in another way that is meaningful to them, and that it's okay if other people are disappointed in that or don't understand it or, would have made a different decision. Ambitious women also are conscientious of their energetic use and their energetic investment. So they invest their energy wisely into the things where they know that they're going to get the most bang for their buck, where they know that it's strategically going to get them and move them in the direction that they want to be going. And they also take time to rest and conserve and be conscientious around what does sustainable ambition look like? Because it's one thing to be ambitious in your 20s. It's really different to be ambitious in your 50s. And I remember actually when I worked my first career working in a psychiatric hospital, I remember I loved working overtime because I got paid time and a half. I think I even got paid double time, like the way that the shifts work. Like if you worked a certain amount of overtime, you got time and a half. And then at a certain point, it turned to double time. And I was like all about how can I make the most money? And I loved my job and I loved my colleagues. And I very much was like, often I was working with friends who were all working this really wild, unique professional experience that no one else could relate to. So I enjoyed the work, but I remember very clearly people who were in their 40s and 50s who were working in that environment, and they were like, you're going to burn yourself out. Like you can't work this, working overtime and working overnights and multiple shifts back to back. It's not sustainable. And I remember thinking like, they don't know what they're talking about. And then I totally did burn myself out, and I totally did, like I had to learn the hard way. And what I saw is that the people who were able to stay there for years, if not decades, in that working environment, they knew how to rest on purpose. And I've seen this now across industries, but it was like, that was the first time I saw it where I was like, oh, rest schmess, like we can rest later. And then I paid the price for it for sure. And so women who are ambitious, they don't subscribe to hustle culture. They subscribe to working in sprints when it serves their purpose and when they need to get something done. But it's not an endless cycle of hustle. It's working strategically and resting strategically. So they use that rest as a performance tool. They are conscientious about building sustainable ambition in a way that they can build some longevity into what they're doing. Ambitious women also really know how to protect their reputation and use their values to do so. And so when they go to make a decision, even an unpopular decision, they are able to leverage their values and use that as a lens for making decisions, even if the decision that they are making is unpopular, because they know that that will allow them to stay in integrity. And they know at the end of the day, if they have to answer to that decision down the road, whether it's in, a couple weeks or a couple months or a couple years or 20 years down the road, that they have stood in their values and they can defend that situation and they can defend that decision. And we're seeing now many, many men who have not done that, where they have made just decisions that undermined their reputation in order to maintain their popularity or their place within a certain social group or a certain group that had a certain level of power. And they're having to answer now to those decisions decades later. And it's not going well for them. And yes, I'm talking about the Epstein files. So we're seeing that ambitious women are really cognizant of, if I make this decision based on these values and stay in my integrity, this is a decision that I can uphold down the road and feel good about. So if the cost means that right now it costs me some popularity or it costs me some people disagreeing with me, that's okay, because I understand that in terms of like my long-term legacy, that the implications making an unpopular decision now will be beneficial down the road. Ambitious women define success by seasons and define ambition or redefine ambition and reroute ambition by seasons. And as I was thinking about this today, I was thinking of all sorts of different examples. The one that came to mind for me as kind of the most dramatic vision of this was when my son was really little, when he was a tiny new baby. And my ambition when he was a newborn was literally to feed him. Like, for 3 months, all I did was try to feed my baby. And we had all sorts of nursing issues. If you've been listening to the show for years and years now, you've heard me talk about it over the years that, feeding my child, nursing my child was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was a very dramatic and traumatic experience. And there was a season where I was running a really successful business and I had a newborn, and my ambition in that season was completely centered around feeding a baby. Like, I did not get dressed. I did not put on a bra for 3 months. I was literally at home, like my body hurt from sitting on the couch and pumping and nursing and pumping and nursing, only getting dressed really to leave the house and take him to doctor's appointments where we had to have weekly weigh-ins. Like, it was a very stressful time. And it was also a time where I had to be ambitious in a way that I never had to be ambitious before. I was also feeling like I had never been less successful at something in my life. And I had to keep showing up and putting in the time. And I couldn't put anything else first. This was the only thing that mattered. Like, everything had to evolve around this one thing. And this was a season. And it felt like an endless season at the time. But when we can recognize when we're in a certain season and we have to be ambitious around a certain thing or around a certain area of growth, it can help us understand that, like, this is the sprint, or this is why we hustle right now, and this is how long I can sustain that for. We can also recognize, okay, now I've gotten through that and now I can rest, or now I can hold on to the stability that I built during that, or I can take time to heal, or I can take time to, exhale a little bit. So we really can look at seasons, where we're at, what's needed most. And so for me right now, ambition is being defined by, as I have an older child, what does that open up for me in terms of space, in terms of energy? As I'm entering my 50s, what do I want to be doing with my time? As I'm entering later stages in my career, what does that mean? So my ambition really in these last couple of years, my thinking around ambition has shifted dramatically as I think about what is it that I want to do for the last 15, 20 years of my career, and how is that different than what I've done for the decades leading up to this point? And so looking at things seasonally is something that when we are ambitious, we're looking at, where am I at right now? What considerations do I need to be making? And how do I want to be ambitious right now? And that might look different in 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, and that's okay. And then the last thing I want to talk about before I get to some questions ambitious women ask themselves is, what does ambition do to our sense of self and our sense of worth? And how do ambitious women define their self-worth? And one of the things that's been extremely challenging for me as a business owner, that has taken a lot of growth and maturity, and something I still struggle with at times, to be sure, or to be honest, is detaching our value from outcomes. And ambitious women are really good at detaching their value from outcomes, because ambitious women have to be willing to take chances and risks where they'll fail. And they have to be okay with that failure and then getting back up and going again. And so this is something I've had a lot of, having multiple businesses over the last 23 years, I haven't had businesses fail per se, but I've definitely had aspects of business where I've had to recognize, like, okay, I tried this thing, it didn't work at all, or it didn't work the way I wanted it to or thought it would, and now I need to reassess. Or I was doing this thing and it was working for a period of time and now it's no longer working in the same way, and now we need to shift and pivot. And so where I haven't had like a massive business failure, there's been plenty of hiccups and plenty of, mini failures along the way where I've had to learn lessons. I've had to recognize this didn't work. It didn't work out the way I wanted it to. And I've had to detach that that doesn't mean I'm stupid. I'm a bad person. I'm not good at this. I'm not a good business owner. I'm not a good coach. I'm not good at whatever the thing was I was doing. I've had to learn how to detach my worth from outcomes and detach my worth from certain metrics. And a friend of mine who's a business owner, we talk about this a lot, where we have to detach our worth from, like, how much money we made in a quarter, or if our business made less money this year than last year. And like, what do we do to that? What does that do to our concept of self? Or what does that do to our sense of self-worth as a business owner? So ambitious women are good at detaching from those outcomes. They have the emotional maturity and the strength of ego to recognize that sometimes things are going to fail. Sometimes things that were doing great are going to no longer do great anymore. And that's not an indication of me being a bad person or me not being good at something. It can mean all sorts of other things. And we have to check the stories that we tell ourselves. So there has to be a lot of emotional maturity that comes with ambition over time in order for that ambition to be sustainable. So ambition isn't always really loud. And sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like setting boundaries. Sometimes it looks like walking away from things. Sometimes there's a lot going on behind the scenes that's like quiet, reflective, and thinking and processing, and not being the loudest person in the room, or the person taking the biggest risks, or the person driving the fanciest car, or the person with these certain metrics. It can be very quiet. It can be subtle. It can be very intentional in a more subdued way. So as you're thinking about ambition and you're thinking about how you want to grow and what you want success to look like for you as you enter whatever season you're in right now in your career and in your life, a few things to think about, a few questions to ask yourself. So the first question that you can ask yourself is, what matters most to me right now? And what matters most to who I am becoming? So thinking through, like, what matters most to me and what matters to the person, the woman, the leader that I'm becoming? And letting that be the lens through which you make decisions and through which you take action. Being conscientious that there might be things that have mattered to you in the past that aren't the most important things anymore. There might be things that are important to the person that you're becoming that you need to start recognizing and prioritizing and giving a little more energy or more of the spotlight to. The second question to ask yourself is, what are the values I want to uphold right now? So as you are thinking through defining success and taking steps towards success, what are the values you want to uphold? I've worked with so many women who recognize that if they want to uphold certain values in their professional realm, that they don't want to stay at the place that they're at right now. They don't want to work maybe in the organization that they're in, or the team that they're in, or with the boss that they're with, because every day they have to show up and compromise their values. So thinking through, in your current season of ambition, what are the values you want to uphold right now? The next question to ask yourself is, how am I building something that's sustainable? How am I building success that is sustainable? How am I building a professional life that's sustainable? How am I building something that I am excited to keep showing up for, that I don't get burnt out on, that doesn't consume me in a way that compromises other aspects of my life? The fourth question to ask yourself is, how am I listening to and honoring myself more than I'm listening to and honoring external noise? There's so much external noise all the time. So whether it's external noise in our workplace, whether it's external noise on social media, in the news, in world politics and US politics, how are you listening to and honoring yourself more than the external noise? How are you listening inward, trusting yourself, listening to what you want, what's going to serve you, what works for you, what upholds your vision of ambition for this season of your life, more so than the external noise that's around you? And then last question number 5 for you to ask yourself is, what are the costs of success or ambition in this instance? And are there costs are you willing to pay the price that you will incur from those costs? Because there will always be costs to the choices that you make. And so looking at what are the costs, you can also, of course, look at, like, what are the benefits here, and are the benefits worth it? Absolutely. But looking at those costs and recognizing that there will be a price to pay. And is that a price that is reasonable for you right now? And only you can answer these questions. And only you have to answer to your answers. So if you can answer these in a way where you're like, I feel great about these answers, and these answers lead me to the place I want to go, you don't need to justify that to anyone else. You don't need to explain it to anyone else. Your ambition doesn't need to make sense to other people. It needs to make sense to you. Your ambition is about you. Your ambition belongs to you. It doesn't belong to someone else. It doesn't belong to to the bigger system that was not built for you to be successful in any ways. It doesn't belong to other people maybe in that system who benefit from the system in ways that you don't. So being conscientious around who gets to make decisions around your ambition, who gets to own your ambition, who is your ambition for, who is your ambition in service of, and are you making yourself person number one in terms of who your ambition is in service of? Because if there's a whole bunch of other people that benefit from your ambition more than you do or before you do, then my guess is you're not building sustainable ambition. If you're building sustainable ambition, you are benefiting from your ambition first and foremost. And that means you can still have many ripples and many other people who are positively impacted and influenced by your ambition, but you deserve to benefit first and foremost. Thank you for being here. If this was your first time listening, I hope you loved this conversation, this episode. If it was your millionth time listening as we approach 1,000 episodes, I hope that you loved this conversation. Please share this episode out. Share this with other women who are considering what ambition looks like to them in this season of life. And know that as we are exploring what ambition looks like and what success looks like, that I am right here getting dirty, messy, and being very imperfect with you every single day. So you're never doing it alone. I am always in this with you. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit sarahdean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at sarahdean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at sarahdeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.